The flame began in the marrow of her bones, a liquid acid seeping through every joint, every fiber of her being. It was not an ordinary pain. It was a parasitic entity devouring her from the inside. Chloe lay sprawled on the old worn carpet, cold sweat beading on her forehead, her breath catching in weak, whimpering moans. Through the hazy mist of tears and agony, she saw a figure sitting motionless in the corner of the room. His eyes were as cold as two shards of glass in the darkness. Not a shred of pity, not a flicker of fear. Only the terrifying stillness of one who has witnessed hell and remained unshaken. "The poison you concocted," his voice was deep and even devoid of all emotion, "has found its way back to your own lips." Chloe tried to prop herself up on her elbows, each small movement sending a new wave of pain crashing over her. "No, it can't be," she stammered, her voice hoarse. "It wasn't me. She was supposed to suffer this. It was Isabella, not me, the shaman." Mr. Kalen did not move. He was like an ancient statue carved from stone and shadow. "You chose the path of blood and tears, Chloe." "No," she screamed, the sound choked by a violent spasm in her chest. "I don't accept this. I can't die wasting away like this after everything I did for him, after everything I sacrificed." Her voice broke, turning into a choked sob of anguish. "You wanted to destroy her. Don't forget that," Mr. Kalen reminded her calmly, each of his words a hammer blow driving the nail deeper into the coffin of truth. A scream, a mixture of rage and despair, erupted from Chloe's chest. She slammed her fist on the floor with all her remaining strength. The physical pain was nothing compared to the storm tearing her soul apart. The sheer injustice of it, the cruel irony, pushed her back into a past she had tried so hard to bury. The memories flooded back, not like a gentle river, but like a flash flood. 5 years ago, a grimy bar in Queens, the dim neon light casting a glow on tired faces and shattered dreams. That's where she first met Ethan. He had nothing. A college degree, but working a temporary manual labor job with only a fire in his eyes and a way with words that made you want to place the world in his hands. He spoke of ambition, of refusing to accept his fate like the other men in the neighborhood. Men who lived their lives in dust and watched the years slip through their fingers. Chloe had fallen in love with the way he refused to surrender to fate. She loved the fire in his eyes. Their relationship began like that, sprouting from the soil of shared aspirations. The first days were sweet. They were like two sleepwalkers in the vast city of New York, hand in hand painting visions of the future. "One day," Ethan said as they walked through Central Park, his breath forming a white cloud in the cold autumn air, "we'll have our own shop, a gleaming electronics repair shop, and your name will be right next to mine on the sign. Hamilton and Hart." Chloe laughed, her eyes sparkling brighter than the distant lights of Manhattan. "And she continued, "will have a real office with a window overlooking the whole city, not that cramped little corner in the law office where I work. We'll travel, Ethan. Maybe Dubai, why not?" He dreamed big dreams, and she silently memorized each one, treating them as the compass for her life. At the end of every month, upon receiving her meager salary as an administrative assistant, she would secretly set a portion aside. She gave up the small pleasures that girls her age craved. No new dresses, no fancy brunches with friends, no expensive cocktails at rooftop bars. When friends teased her about her frugality, she would just smile and say, "Today's savings will build tomorrow's empire." Dollar by dollar, she saved a considerable amount. One evening in the small apartment they shared, she handed Ethan a thick envelope. "Take it," she said softly. "It will help you get started." Ethan looked at her, his eyes wide with astonishment. "But Chloe, how long did it take you to save this?" "Don't say anything," she interrupted him, a shy smile on her lips. "It's not much, but it's a start." He was silent for a long moment, emotion clear on his face. Then he pulled her into a tight hug, burying his face in her hair. "You are my blessing, Chloe. With you, I can conquer the world." That night, Chloe's heart swelled with pride. She believed she was laying the first bricks for their future for the house with the white picket fence he always talked about with children playing in the sunny backyard. And Ethan did start his first business. A tiny shop squeezed between other storefronts on a busy street. He repaired phones with cracked screens, sold cheap headphones, and prepaid SIM cards. A small glass case displayed a few used iPhones, attracting the curious glances of the neighborhood's youth. Chloe was always by his side. She was the one who encouraged him when business was slow. Sometimes after a long, tiring day at her own office, she would still take the subway to the shop to help him clean up and close. "You're working too hard," he would often say to her, gently wiping a smudge of machine oil from her cheek. "This is our dream, Ethan," she would always reply. "We have to fight for it together." Their love at the beginning was like that. An alliance, a shared sacrifice. Chloe gave everything, believing she was not just investing in his future, but in theirs. She had bet her entire life on the promise in his eyes, never knowing that the bet from the very start was destined to make her the loser. The golden dream began to crack slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a tiny fissure in a windshield that you only notice when the sun hits it at just the right angle. The little shop, Hamilton's Tech, was no longer a kiosk. It had moved to a larger, brighter storefront. Ethan no longer wore old t-shirts. He now wore neatly pressed collared shirts. The success they had built together had changed him. The perfect harmony gave way to silences and unanswered questions. His phone, once used only for work calls, now became an inseparable part of him, an invisible wall between them. It would vibrate at odd hours, and he would immediately step out onto the balcony to answer, his voice lowered to a whisper. "Who was that?" Chloe would ask when he came back inside, trying to keep her voice casual. He would shrug irritably, his eyes avoiding hers. "No one important, just a supplier." Chloe wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But the distance between them grew. One evening, as they sat on the sofa, he was absently scrolling through his phone, a discreet smile playing on his lips. Chloe couldn't bear it any longer. The question that had been brewing inside her for months finally burst out. "Ethan," she began, her heart pounding in her chest, "are you cheating on me?" He looked up, and instead of confusion or guilt, she saw only surprise, almost offense. He laughed, a dry, mirthless sound. "Me cheat on the woman who has done everything for me? Chloe, don't be ridiculous. Do you think I have time for that?" The sincerity in his denial, or perhaps his excellent acting, made her feel ashamed. She believed him. She berated herself for her baseless jealousy. Then came the unexplained absences. "I have to meet a business partner," he'd say. "It won't take long." Another time it was an emergency meeting about sourcing components. Chloe frowned. "Another meeting?" "We just fix phones and laptops, Ethan. Why all the mystery?" He clicked his tongue, a gesture of impatience she was beginning to hate. "Chloe, you don't understand business. If you want us to grow, let me handle my work." She fell silent, but a heavy weight settled in her chest. She knew him too well. She saw the different way his eyes lit up when he spoke on the phone with his supplier. His voice became softer, more alive, not the tired tone he usually used with her. Whenever she dared to question him, he would roll his eyes and cut her off. "Don't start, Chloe. Are you going to ruin everything we've built just because of your jealousy?" So Chloe sank into silence, but a cold certainty began to form within her. Something, or rather someone, had taken the place she once thought was hers alone in Ethan's heart. And despite the painful doubts, she continued to love him. She clung to the rare moments when he would place a hand on her shoulder and say, "Chloe, you're my strength. Without you, I'm nothing." A painful thought crept into her mind. What if, despite all she had given, despite her sacrifices, Ethan had chosen another life, a life away from her? It was a normal Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was standing behind the counter, slightly bored, waiting for customers. Suddenly, a gleaming black Mercedes-Benz pulled up right in front of the shop. In this neighborhood, a car like that always turned heads. The door opened, and a young woman stepped out. She exuded an effortless elegance. long, glossy black hair, a perfectly tailored blazer, and the scent of a delicate perfume wafted through the air as she entered. Isabella. She came from a wealthy family on the Upper East Side, a world completely different from Queen's. She approached the counter. "Hello," she said, her voice as clear as a bell. "The screen on my MacBook is cracked. Can you take a look?" Ethan immediately straightened up, a polite yet charming smile spreading across his face. "Of course," he replied, his voice suddenly smoother. "Let me see." She placed the slim laptop on the counter. As he examined it, their fingers brushed accidentally. A small spark. Isabella didn't pull her hand away. Her gaze met his, a look full of confidence and challenge. After diagnosing the problem, Ethan hesitated for a second, then boldly said, "I'll need your number to let you know when it's done. And maybe I'll keep it in case any other issues arise." Isabella smiled faintly, a knowing smile. "No problem." That night, Ethan sent a text. The conversation seemed innocent at first, revolving around the computer repair. But soon the messages became more personal, more flirtatious. And just like that, his absences became more frequent, his lies more elaborate. Chloe had learned to recognize Ethan's silence. Lately, the phone never left his hand. He was constantly tapping on the screen, a private smile on his face that she never saw him direct at her. When she got close, he would quickly lock it, his expression turning cold. The torture of not knowing gnawed at her. One evening, after a long day and a pointless argument, he had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted. The phone lay on the coffee table, its screen dark. Chloe couldn't resist any longer. She tiptoed over her heart, threatening to leap out of her chest. She picked up the phone. Her hand trembled. The password, she knew it by heart. The anniversary of the day they first met. How ironic. She hesitated, a part of her screaming to stop, to just live in blissful, feigned ignorance. But the other part, the part that had been hurt and suspicious for so long, won. She pressed the numbers, the screen lit up. She opened the messaging app, and there it was, the name Isabella right at the top. The words flowed before her eyes, sweet, harmonious, burning with an intimacy she hadn't received in a long time. "I can't stop thinking about your smile. Meet tonight, I know a place. Ethan, you make me feel like I'm the only woman in the world." Every line was a knife twisting in her heart. She scrolled up, saw the photos they sent each other. Isabella in a stunning evening gown. Ethan beaming beside her at a fancy restaurant he had told Chloe they couldn't afford. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Using her own phone, she shakily took pictures of every message screen, every photo. She had to have proof, even if each image tore her soul into smaller pieces. That night, Chloe didn't sleep. She sat in the darkness of the living room, Ethan's phone back in its place. The shock of her discovery still burned in her chest. But as the first rays of dawn crept through the window, the pain gave way to something else. A cold, steel-hard resolve. She had to confront him. This game of lies had to end. Chloe sat beside him on the sofa. The same sofa where just hours before he had slept soundly in his deceit. The room was filled with the pale morning light, illuminating every speck of dust floating in the air like uncontainable secrets. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night staring at the screenshots, letting the bitter truth seep into every cell. The initial pain had frozen into something colder and sharper determination. Ethan yawned, stretched, and rubbed his eyes. He looked at her, his usual tired smile on his face. "Good morning, love." Those words, the words she had once longed to hear every day, now felt like an insult. She didn't return his greeting. She kept her voice calm, a terrifying calm. "Ethan?" She said his name, void of emotion. "Who is Isabella?" The smile on Ethan's face froze. The sleepiness vanished instantly, replaced by wariness. What are you talking about?" Without a word, Chloe held her phone out in front of him. The screen lit up, displaying the sweet messages, the radiant photos of him and the other woman. "I read everything, Ethan. Everything. You have nothing left to deny." He stared at the screen, his face shifting from surprise to cornered. He was silent for a long moment, a heavy silence that enveloped the room. Then the unbelievable happened. He let out a breath, a long sigh that was almost one of relief, as if the burden of lying had finally been lifted. "Chloe," he began, his voice low, the pretense gone. "I was going to tell you. I was just trying to find the right way to say it without hurting you." A bitter, dry laugh escaped Chloe's throat. "Without hurting me? How much longer were you going to let me live in this lie, Ethan? When were you planning on telling me?" He looked away uncomfortably, unable to meet her gaze. "Chloe, I didn't want to deceive you, but things changed between us. It's not the same anymore. I tried, I really did, but I just don't feel that way anymore." He sighed, as if he were the victim in this story. "You and me, I think it's time we ended it." Chloe had imagined a fiery argument. She had prepared for apologies, for pleas of forgiveness, but she was not prepared for this cold, cruel finality. "End it." Her voice broke. "After everything I sacrificed, after all these years." Ethan shook his head, impatience clear in his gesture. "You're a good girl, Chloe, a really good girl. But I need more in my life. With her, I see a different future." The tears she had been holding back finally streamed down, hot and bitter. "So, I was never good enough for you." "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Ethan replied, his voice becoming curt. "Just accept it and move on." He stood up, her presence seeming to suffocate him. He walked out of the room, leaving Chloe stunned on the sofa, her world having just collapsed in a few sentences. In the days following that painful confrontation, Chloe still refused to accept it. She clung to a foolish hope that this was just a passing crisis, that he would realize his mistake and come back. She called. Sometimes he answered, but his voice was always brief and distant. "I'm busy, Chloe. We'll talk later." But later never came. Her texts were met with 2 cold blue checkmarks. Locked out of her own apartment because he had changed the locks, she decided to wait for him in front of the building one evening. She sat on the cold steps, shivering in her thin coat, watching the people pass by, feeling invisible. When Ethan finally appeared, he was startled to see her there, as if she were a ghost from his past. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" he asked, annoyance plain on his face. "Ethan, I'm begging you, we need to talk," she said, her voice pleading, her eyes filled with tears. He shook his head, his frustration growing. "How many times do I have to tell you it's over, Chloe? You need to move on with your life." She lowered her head, his words like needles in her heart. How could he say those words so easily without a hint of remorse? But Ethan wasn't finished. He added one more sentence, a sentence that drove the final nail into the coffin of her love and sacrifice. "And if this is all about the money you gave me," he said coldly, "then just tell me the total. I'll write you a check and we can be done for good." Those words hit Chloe like a physical blow. It was worse than the betrayal. It reduced all her years of love, sacrifice, and dreams to a cheap financial transaction. "Pay me back," she whispered, unable to believe her ears. "You think I gave you that money to get paid? No, Ethan. I gave it to you because we were building a life together. It wasn't a loan. It was our dream." She looked up, her vision blurred by tears, but her eyes blazing with the fire of indignation. "You're leaving me because you found a girl with money, someone who can give you a better life than I can. Isn't that it? Do you think I can't see it?" She screamed, her voice cracking. "Say it to my face, you coward! Tell me my sacrifices, the years I believed in you, meant nothing just because someone else can give you an easier life." Ethan looked away, refusing to face the truth in her words. His silence was the clearest confession. "I have nothing more to say," he said curtly, turning towards the building's entrance. Chloe, in her desperation, followed close behind, still trying to hold on to something that was already dead. But as she reached for the doorknob to follow him inside, Ethan was a step ahead. Slam! The heavy wooden door slammed shut right in her face, the sound of the lock clicking into place like a final fatal gunshot. "Ethan, Ethan, open the door, please," she whispered in a broken voice, pressing her cheek against the cold wood. She pounded lightly on the door, hesitantly at first, then harder and harder, her desperate rhythm echoing in the night's silence. Ethan, you can't do this to me. Not after everything we've been through. But from behind the door there was only a dead silence, as if he had erased her existence with a single gesture, as if he could no longer hear her cries. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with the light rain that had begun to fall. She kept calling his name over and over until her voice was raw and just a whisper. Minutes passed like centuries. Finally exhausted and shattered, she stepped back. Her heart had turned to ash. Standing in the now heavy rain, a terrible truth began to take root in her soul. Love was dead. And where it once existed, a dark, toxic seed had just begun to sprout. The following days passed in a long, nightmarish haze. Chloe returned to her small apartment, once a sanctuary, now a cage filled with painful memories. Every corner whispered his name. The sofa where they used to watch movies, the kitchen where she used to cook him late dinners after long days at the shop. Everything was a cruel reminder of what she had lost. She stopped by the shop, Hamilton and Hart, the name she had once proudly come up with, foolishly hoping to find him there, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But Ethan was barely there anymore. A new employee was there instead, a young man who knew nothing of the shop's past. When she asked the neighboring shopkeepers, they answered vaguely, "He rarely comes by. Seems like someone else is managing it now." A few weeks later, the final news came not from Ethan, but from an old mutual friend. Ethan had moved into a luxury apartment on the Upper East Side, the same area as Isabella. Worse, he had sold the shop they had built from nothing, the shop into which she had poured her sweat tears and every last penny of her savings. Chloe received this news as the ultimate betrayal, the fatal stab to her already bleeding heart. He hadn't just erased their love, he had wiped out every physical trace of her existence from his life, as if she had never been a part of his success story. She came home in tears every night. Friends tried to comfort her, to drag her out, but nothing could fill the gaping void in her chest. "Why?" she repeated between sobs, the question echoing unanswered in her head. She remembered the envelope full of cash the dreams shared under the dim moonlight of Queens. And now Ethan belonged to another world, another woman. A world built on the foundation of her sacrifice. Every morning she woke with a flicker of hope for a call, a text, an explanation. But her phone remained cruelly silent. She stared at it for hours, her eyes burning, waiting for a sign that never came. She barely ate. Her sleep was fitful and filled with nightmares. Her strength waned, and no words of comfort could soothe her broken heart. The pain turned into obsession, the obsession into a simmering rage. It was in this state of utter desperation that one day she first heard of another path. A dark path she would have never considered before. It came from an older colleague at her office, a Haitian woman who held mystical beliefs. Seeing Chloe's haggard state, she had quietly pulled her aside. "If your pain is too great," she whispered, her eyes looking deep into Chloe's, "there are people who can help you, people who see what we cannot." At first, Chloe hesitated. She was scared. She was a modern woman living in New York. She didn't believe in spells and magic. But her pain, it was real. It was tangible. It was a monster devouring her from the inside. Then one night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a dark, persistent thought crept into her mind like a venomous snake, slithering into the desolate garden of her paradise lost. "You can't let him get away with this." Deep inside her, a poison was brewing, nurtured by tears and betrayal. After all the suffering, after all the trampled sacrifices, Chloe made a terrible decision. She would not let them be happy at the expense of her pain. She went to the address her colleague had given her, a small herbal shop tucked away in a Brooklyn alley. The air inside was thick with the scent of dried roots and incense. The man behind the counter, Mr. Kalin, had deep, cold eyes that seemed to see right through her. Chloe trembled as she sat in the chair opposite him. I gave him everything," she began, her voice cracking. "He left me for another woman. I want him back." Mr. Kalin nodded slowly, as if he had heard this story 100 times. You have two choices, he said, his voice deep and even. We can perform a ritual to bind him to make him return to you. But this kind of binding does not last. The thread will break over time and he will leave again. He paused, staring at her, letting his words sink in. The second choice is to eliminate the one who has taken your place, to attack the root of the problem. Then, with nothing in his way, he will naturally come back to you. Chloe was stunned, her fingers nervously intertwined. Eliminate? What do you mean? Mr. Kalen bowed his head slightly, an almost imperceptible smile gracing his lips. Make her disappear, one way or another. For instance, make her suffer, sicken her, until she's no longer a problem. The thought was horrifying. Chloe had imagined winning him back with tears, with patience, maybe even with petty revenge, but this was a path of no return, a step into a darkness she wasn't sure she could come back from. And if I only choose to make him come back, she asked in a trembling voice. He will come back, yes, Mr. Kalen replied. He will miss you, desire you, but my magic will fade. His love for the other, the wealth she brings, those are powerful forces. Sooner or later he will leave again, and you will suffer again, even more than this time. Those words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. To live through this pain again. No, she didn't have the strength to endure it one more time. She couldn't. Chloe felt her tears start to fall, but this time they were not tears of weakness. A new light flickered in her eyes, a cold glint of anger and ruthless determination. She had suffered enough. Now it was someone else's turn to taste the pain. Then, she said, her voice hard and cold as ice, attack her. Let her suffer. Let her taste a fraction of what I'm going through. Mr. Kalen smiled with satisfaction. He took out a small cloth doll, a lock of black hair Chloe had managed to get from Isabella's brush after following her to a salon and some strange herbs. You have chosen, he said as he began the ritual, murmuring incantations in an ancient tongue. Starting tonight, Isabella's body will bear the weight of your pain. The decision was made. The seed of hatred was sown. And Chloe, blinded by her agony, had no idea she had just watered it with her own soul. At first it was just simple discomfort, things easily dismissed as the consequence of a stressful New York life. Isabella started complaining of persistent headaches, sharp pains behind her temples that no painkiller could fully relieve. Ethan, busy enjoying his new life and growing business, just brushed it off, telling her she needed more rest. But soon things became strange and alarming. One morning, while preparing for a charity gala, Isabella suddenly felt dizzy. The luxurious room began to spin before her eyes, and before she could cry out, she fainted, collapsing onto the marble floor. Her parents, members of the elite who controlled everything, were terrified. They immediately took her to the best private hospital in the city. Test after test followed. MRIs, CT scans, blood work, spinal taps. The best doctors with degrees from Harvard and Johns Hopkins were completely baffled. All her vitals were normal. Her body, medically speaking, was perfectly healthy. It must be exhaustion, a leading specialist said with a helpless shrug. She should rest, reduce stress, and everything will be fine. But it wasn't fine. In the following days, Isabella grew weaker. She couldn't stand on her own without support. Her rosy complexion turned pale. Her clear eyes became cloudy and lifeless. It was as if life was slowly being drained from her body. Ethan was by her side almost every day, not out of unconditional love, but out of a sense of confusion and a vague fear. He who just weeks before had been radiant with happiness beside her now wore a worried and irritable expression. He encouraged her, repeating that everything would be okay, but inside he was beginning to feel suffocated. The bright future he had envisioned was being clouded by this mysterious illness. Weeks passed and Isabella's condition worsened. She lost weight rapidly, and her shiny black hair began to fall out in clumps. It was then that her father, a powerful man who believed in things beyond science, made a decision. If modern medicine can find nothing, he said one evening with a resolute tone, then this illness is not of this world. Through his connections, he found a spiritual expert, Someone said to have the ability to see what the naked eye could not. After performing a complex ritual, this person came to a frightening conclusion: this was not a normal illness. It had been intentionally inflicted a malevolent curse, and from what he saw, it came from a woman with a deep connection to their daughter's boyfriend's past. Isabella's family immediately grew suspicious. All eyes turned to Ethan, although there was no proof the coincidence was too strange. A jilted ex-girlfriend, a mysterious illness appearing right after. Isabella's parents, who had always looked down on Ethan's background, now saw him as a source of contagion, a harbinger of bad luck. They performed a more powerful ritual, a reversal ritual intended not only to break the curse, but to return to sender all the malice they had received. When Ethan arrived at the mansion to visit Isabella, her father stopped him at the door. "You can't see her anymore," he said coldly, his eyes not hiding his contempt. "But I have to be with her," Ethan protested, feeling humiliated. "No," her father cut him off. "Our family will handle this. You should keep your distance. It's best if you disappear from my daughter's life." Ethan had no choice but to accept, rudely cast out by the family of the woman he believed he loved and who was the key to his future. Meanwhile, in Queens, Chloe was still unaware of what was happening. She only knew that her revenge was working. She followed Isabella on social media, seeing posts about her hospitalization, seeing prayers from friends. A wicked, twisted smile would often play on her lips whenever she saw them. But then, in the days following the reversal ritual performed by Isabella's family, Chloe began to feel strangely tired. At first she thought it was stress and lack of sleep, but the fatigue quickly turned into aches and pains. The signs became more alarming. The headaches Isabella had once suffered now tormented her tenfold. Then came the cramping pains in her stomach, so intense she would double over. As the pain began to escalate with no medicine able to soothe it, fear began to creep into her mind. She tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in front of her family and colleagues, but her weakened body betrayed her. She lost a noticeable amount of weight, and the dark circles under her eyes grew deeper. Meanwhile, on the Upper East Side, a miracle occurred. Isabella began to recover. The color returned to her cheeks. The pain vanished, and she started eating again. The ritual had worked. To ensure her safety and sever all toxic ties, her parents took the opportunity to send her to Switzerland to study and recuperate far away from Ethan and the invisible dangers of New York City. For Chloe, conversely, her life was just beginning its descent into hell. The pain was no longer isolated episodes. It became a fire, a liquid acid seeping through every joint, every fiber of her being. And it was then, as she dragged her tormented body back to Mr. Kalin's herbal shop, sprawled on the floor, that she understood. His cold, pitiless gaze confirmed it. The evil she had wished upon another had now returned multiplied and was devouring her. That was the cruel shock that brought her back to reality. But reality was now a hell of her own making. All the memories she had just relived, from the grimy bar in Queens, to the door slammed in her face from the mysterious herbal shop, to the physical agony tearing her apart, were just fragments of a tragic story. The story that had led her to her current state, crumpled on the floor of a man she had paid to destroy someone else, only to become the victim of her own sown hatred. The pain did not subside. It was a faithful and cruel companion. Many nights she couldn't sleep, only able to lie there listening to her bones creak, feeling each wave of agony wash over her. Hope was dead. Remorse was dead. Only a single flame flickered in her soul of ash hatred. Hatred for Isabella, who had stolen her love. Hatred for Mr. Kalin, who had indirectly pushed her into this hell. But above all, she hated Ethan. He was the source of all her pain. He who had taken her youth, her savings, her dreams, then discarded her like an old trinket. And he was still out there unscathed. Isabella was abroad, out of reach. But Ethan was still here. One night, unable to bear it any longer, she used her last ounce of strength to return to Mr. Kalin's. Her appearance was now horrific. Aunt emaciated, her eyes sunken and burning with a crazed light. "Help me," she begged, her voice hoarse and broken. "I can't go on like this. If I have to die, then I don't want Ethan to live. He has to pay too. Mr. Kalen observed her for a long time, his face as impassive as stone. What you ask is very serious, he said slowly, more serious than anything you have done. I don't care, Chloe screamed, her voice torn by pain and despair. After what he did to me, he threw me away like an old shoe for someone else for her luxury cars and Upper East Side apartment. If I have to die in this pain, then he has to die with me. Mr. Kalen sighed a sigh that was almost bored. Do you understand that what you're saying is irreversible? If we perform this ritual, it will create a final link. His breath will be cut off. He will never return. Chloe nodded, tears rolling down her hollow cheeks. But they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of final release. Let him die, she whispered. I have nothing left to lose. The ritual began. This time it was darker and more terrifying. Mr. Kalen used a photo of Ethan that Chloe had brought, and a few drops of her own blood drawn from a cut on her finger. He chanted the incantations, his voice echoing in the small room like the wind whistling through an ancient tomb. It is done, he declared, breaking the silence. The link is sealed. The man you named will now take on your final pain. A few days later, Ethan was in his new office, a high-paying finance job that Isabella's father had helped him get before casting him out. He was looking at stock charts on his computer screen when a searing pain like a red-hot drill erupted in his head. He staggered, clutching his head, a choked cry caught in his throat. Before the horrified eyes of his colleagues, he collapsed to the floor, convulsing. He was rushed to the emergency room, but he never truly regained consciousness. The doctors could find no cause. His brain had suffered a massive, inexplicable hemorrhage, and one morning in a luxurious hospital room, he had sold his soul to obtain Ethan Hamilton, drew his last breath. Chloe heard the news while lying in her old bed, consumed by fever. A friend had read the news and called to tell her. A bitter, ghoulish smile flickered across her dry, cracked lips. She had gotten what she wanted. Ethan had not escaped his fate. He had paid the price. But the smile vanished almost immediately, replaced by an absolute emptiness. Because even though he was dead, nothing had changed for her. The reversal curse was still there. Her body was still imprisoned in a dungeon of pain, and her soul more than ever was being consumed by the flames of hatred and regret. Lying there in the final moments of her life, Chloe realized a terrible truth. Love, when betrayed, can become a weapon of destruction. To promise a life with someone and then abandon them is not just a betrayal. It is a theft of trust, of years of dreams. Betrayal destroys, but vengeance incinerates. When you nurture hatred, when you seek to destroy another, you ultimately drink the poison you yourself have brewed. In the small room in Queens, Chloe took her last breath alone. No one was by her side. She had won her war of revenge, but the price was everything. She and Ethan, two people who had once dreamed of a future together, had finally sunk into eternal darkness together, bound by a link even stronger than love destruction. Their story ended not with a dream wedding, but with two graves, a silent warning of how love can lift people to the highest peaks, but hatred can drag them into a bottomless abyss, where only ashes and oblivion remain.